kind of a little mistake on my end. I apologize for that. So if we
The
go
video
to,
quality should be way better for everybody right now. If you still have any issues, let me know in the chat, and I'll keep my eye out for that. Thank you.
all right, so if we go to the site itself, as we were picking up from where we just left off, the rock that we're looking for, actually I think it was just gravel that we're looking for. Rock is probably not the right term. There we go. So the gravel that's on the site that I'm using currently, and this is going to lead into something, I just need to find it so you guys can see the source that we're working with here. Where did it go? There it is. So this particular texture here it's been modified a little bit. I think I adjusted some levels in Photoshop and did some other crazy stuff to it, but nothing too intense, just mostly some small levels and hue adjustments. But you can easily grab this from the site for 1 point, which translates out to about $1 roughly, which it's a fantastic value. I've never seen any scan that cheap with the same quality here. And I've taken all of this and I have put it into the editor right here. And this is actually using, I don't even want to say it's an advanced material, it's actually pretty basic, but I have the ability to vertex paint on each one of these displaced meshes. And essentially what we're having here is the ability to have oil stains and rust stains and other discolorations and imperfections popping through to the final result that you see, and it's all interactive and I can change it at any point in real time. And that's just one of the ways that you can kind of adjust this and really get more out of these scans, because you're not just limited to what you see, you're also limited to, I mean, like your imagination. Anything that you want to add in here you can add. Let me go back to my vertex paint and see if I can see my brush. There it is. So I need to paint with black, I believe it was. Yeah, so I can actually come in here and add vertex paint of oil and anything else, and really just do it randomly. This is kind of just a quick, let's pop it out of here. Erase. How do I erase? No. It's been a while since I've messed with the vertex paint in this thing. There we go.
Yeah, it can be a bit finicky.
But if you come in here and kind of just quickly adjust some things here and there, you can get a pretty good looking result in a pretty quick amount of time. I mean, it's nothing particularly fantastic, but I feel like it adds some visual interest to what I'm trying to do. And instead of it just being pure perfect rocks, because if you walk on these things, it definitely doesn't look like that. It's never perfect at all. It's always, there's grease, there's leftover creosote from the ties, there's just all sorts of crap and gunk that pile up in these things. And if I really want to push this even further, I'll probably add like trash, because oftentimes people who live near these ties use them as a way to walk around, because it's a little faster than trying to navigate through the woods. And what you can end up doing is, what is it? Is it Alt? No, it's not. Anyway, what you can end up doing is getting a lot more of a like, people live here, people use this kind of feel if you have debris strewn about. And of course that's not something that we're going to cover today, because that's not a Megascans issue. But I did see in the chat before I refreshed my window that the Linus kind of covered it a little bit, that the rails themselves were made with Dedu, which technically was made with Megascans because it did use the textures inside of Dedu, which of course are Megascanned. The wood itself, the actual wooden ties, are made with ZBrush and textured in Dedu. There is no Megascan surface for that. It's all just done in there, other than obviously the basic scans that were used on it, but nothing from the Megascans library from the website, just everything that came with Quixel Suite. So I actually may even go back to them and maybe do like a quick tutorial on how to make something like that if you guys are interested. It's actually the first piece of wood I've ever done inside of ZBrush. I'm glad people like it, because I'm terribly hard on myself, so I wasn't even sure if it was even that good. But so basically, yeah, the idea behind this stream is really to try to see if we can get you guys up to speed. Even for the more experienced users, there's always something I think anybody can learn. I've been using Unreal for 10 years, and I'm still finding out new stuff about it every single day I use it. But hey, Owen, is there anything you want to cover, so I don't end up talking myself to death?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say one thing about the texturing as well. Probably not for this stream, but definitely for a future one. Just the scans can also be used directly in Unreal to texture like large surfaces like walls, or very long big meshes that you couldn't properly texture in Dedu, because it would just be the detail would be too small to cover. So I might go over like creating it's just importing and blending together some Megascanned materials to make a really nice, smooth, detailed flat material just directly in the editor. So that's definitely an option as well. You don't always have to texture externally for less detailed objects, but just wanted to say that as well.
Right, right. Now, maybe we can go over the process for how these rocks and whatnot were actually added into the engine. Because what you can see here, I'm just kind of holding Alt and clicking, and you can see where the impression of the wood has been left. All this is here is just a flat plane. Well, not really a flat. Let me rephrase. This is a plane that has one segment here, one segment here. So it's basically, what is it, like 9 triangles essentially, or 6? I think it's like 6 triangles. I may have actually subdivided it slightly before I brought it in, just to give it a little bit more room for the Unreal tessellation to play. But I've got this set up on a, oops, wrong button. I keep forgetting what the content browser is. It's Control-Shift-F, not Control-Shift-G. But I've actually got the ballast itself set up on an instance that I can control the end result with as well. And the tessellation is something that you can change on the fly with this setup. So at any point I can come in here and change how strong it is, or how much it pops out. I actually have it set to 4, which is probably way too much overkill for this, because you can see it doesn't even really pop up until right past level 2. And level 1 it kind of starts going away, but even at level 1 it's probably fine, now that I'm thinking about it. Because it really isn't that much of a difference.
Yeah, the quality is quite, as you go up you see less. And you can also use the distance fade to, if you were trying to be careful about performance in a game, you can have it so that only these are close, but that's obviously some more advanced stuff. But yeah, the tessellation does add a huge amount of depth and kind of extra quality to the material. So it's definitely.
And you can see what I did with the normal strength here too, where I did the same thing I did in the ferns, where there's almost no depth to these scans in the engine unless you actually go through and modify it for the engine and the end result you're trying to achieve. So if I use the settings I just had, which is 2 multiplied on red and green and 0.5 for the blue to drop the blue down, suddenly there's depth to it. It may not be the most realistic result, but in terms of functionality for a real-time solution, I think it looks pretty good. I've also got the AO kind of on a parameter itself as well, and this is something I can just change at any point I feel like, just by changing these sliders around. Now this is set to, I believe it's set to, let's just look at the material, I don't want to just guess, but it should be set to burn, which is probably the wrong thing to use for it. Yeah, color burn. I could use multiply, but I'd have to probably link in a 3-point levels function as well. So I think color burn was just the easiest way to go about it. But the setup for this material is super simple, at least for me anyway. Just a lot of this just relates to the tessellation. So if you haven't used tessellation before, it's not hard at all. You just use a parameter for displacement strength coming out of your tessellation or your displacement map, which I put in the green channel, which goes into a multiply, which then goes into a distance parameter, which is just literally press 1, convert to parameter, call it distance, or whatever you really want to call it. Multiply on a vertex normal, which then goes into the world displacement. And the tessellation multiplier is just a value that you can assign randomly to whatever you want. I set it to 100, but the controller in the instance is what actually ends up changing that value in the end, which is why it's set to 4 or 2 now, or even 1 I think it is. I have a lerp set up for the oil roughness, so that it actually affects the texture itself, and it affects the areas that I vertex paint into, so that it doesn't just look like rocks that have just been painted black. Same thing with the texture sample itself. The AO map gets blended into it via an AO strength parameter, which is multiplied into the texture sample, which is then lerped together with the multiply to bring out the oil stains that I want through vertex paint, which is controlled by the red channel of the vertex color. And then that then goes on the base color. Metallic is 0. You don't even have to really add it. I think it just does it anyway. I'm just kind of weird and throw it in there. Other than that, yeah, it's just a really simple basic setup, and I think the end result does look pretty convincing. At least I'd like to think so.
Definitely, the scans add so much detail. Like, they really do carry materials. So trying to keep the setup as simple as possible is definitely important, and let the scans do the heavy lifting for the detail.
Now, normally I would actually be vertex snapping these together, but for the purposes of what we're doing, I don't really care. But I actually have these rails set up so they're modular as well. Not the no, yeah, the rails are modular, and the pieces of wood, ties, are modular. So if I pull this out of the terrain, you can see that the wood itself even has vertex paint on it, so I can come in and paint in and out any kind of rust that I want. I may even come in there and add the ability to add more oil stains to it too. It's all really basic, and it doesn't hold up well unless the rails are like right there on it, because then it looks really fake. But if I rotate this at 90-degree increments, you can see that the creosote, the actual wood treatment that the railroad companies use to fight off rot and decay, starts to show through, which gives you the ability to just kind of rotate this in any direction you want, and it gives me pretty much roughly, what is it, like 16 different, or 12 or 16 different combinations of this particular piece of wood just by rotating it. So, and you can kind of see it repeat every so often, but when you add the rocks to it and you have the displacement pop through, it almost looks like there's rocks kind of collecting on top from being disturbed as this giant thing rolls over it. So I feel like it really does add a lot, just to like really just try to push the final result any way you possibly can, because these game engines have come so far from where they were when I was working with them 10 years ago, or 15 years ago even, to the point where like some of this stuff is almost indistinguishable from reality. Like the stuff that you put up on your art station is phenomenal, Owen. Like I'm going to bring it up. You want to talk about how you did some of that?
Sure. So yeah, basically I've been playing with the Megascans for a little while, and just trying to make some simple scenes using as few input assets as possible while trying to get some cool quality. And yeah, here's some of the scenes. This is actually a tutorial that's on the YouTube side if you haven't seen it already, just going over how you can use some simple masks made in Studio to create some layered ice materials. But genuinely, like, the scans add so much quality and detail to your scenes. Like it takes a lot of the hard work out and allows you to kind of just really have fun playing with different material properties. And most of these materials were just made by importing a bunch of surfaces and then swapping out different roughness and cavity maps and stuff. And there was also, like, you just get so much detail for if you set up the shader once, you can just make instances and then throw in new maps, and right away you get crazy amount of difference, which is cool.
Now you actually did use some of the desert scans for this, didn't you, to turn it into ice?
Yeah, so all of those cracks are just there's a lot of cracked wasteland scans which have a lot of cool weird detail that work perfectly obviously for desert, but I also felt that if they're flattened down, they can also act as cool masks, as they have that kind of very sharp shadowed effect. So this is just goes to show that you can use Megascans in completely different ways and still get away with it. You should never think, oh, this is desert, it can only be used in a desert context. Just think about the masks as actual just values and how you can use them somewhere else. And yeah.
Now this image here is the one that I chose out of all of them to use as the reference image for our stream announcement, because I felt like this was probably some of the best real-time stuff I've seen in quite a while. Because this, like, even from like where I'm sitting right now looking at my monitor, this looks like a photograph to me. And
oh, thank you.
I mean, the composition is just perfect. It looks like it's cold. It looks like I need a jacket just staring at this. Like I'm looking out my window and I'm like, man, I know it's like 90 degrees outside, but it's, well, for you Europeans, it's like 34 degrees outside, but it's completely just, it really sets an awesome mood. And knowing that you can do this with the tools that we've made, I hope it gives people the inspiration to realize that just because it's desert sand or it has cracks doesn't mean you can't use it to make something else. I mean, I've taken stuff in Studio frequently and turned it into something completely different. Like there's concrete in there that I use as dirt. There's grass that I've used as highlights to dirt without actually having it look like grass, because you can change the albedo value of anything in Studio. And when you kick that out into the engine, what you end up getting is just a absolutely ridiculously phenomenal look. Like this is all done with all of our tools, and this is all
yeah,
in
like
engine.
every single. And honestly, if you go to the more green forest one, there's a overgrown forest. Yeah, the second one there. Basically, that people were like, oh, how many different atlases did you use? That's all. Like I think there's two leaf atlases in that entire scene. It's just there's so many it's so dense that it just gives the illusion of a lot. But honestly, there was like a fern atlas and a just a regular kind of average leaf atlas, and it was just used everywhere. And you just get this really, really, just the scans really pop, and they really look nice when you start combining them.
So I saw in chat there was someone asking how I got the rocks to pop up on top of the wood, and that's actually coming from the displacement strength of this material. So if I bring up the content browser again and then bring back the instance itself, actually I can hide that. The one of the values in here allows us to change how much the displacement strength works. I believe it's this one right here. Yeah. So when I change this, the rocks pop through the wood. So it's been set to level 16. Just because I felt like that was a pretty good compromise between too much and too little. It's very much an eyeballed thing. You could probably use the same scan and find that you'd like it to be 24 or 42. But I think that 16 is a pretty good compromise, where it still looks like rocks, but it's not having to force me to change the entire layout of my track system here to compensate for the additional pushback caused by the rocks popping through in random places. But it works out to my benefit because, like, from this distance here, it's almost impossible to tell that those are just poking through. If I could get a little bit of shadow around them, it'd be perfect. I'll have to figure out a way to do that. But in the end, like, the end result of this is going to be to demonstrate what we can do with Megascans, and this is in such an early phase. Like, I haven't had a lot of time to work on it because I've had so much other stuff to do. The Megascans release has been such a humongous strain on the entire company. We've been doing so much to keep up with just the entire volume of people asking for help or just talking about the tools, and it's so much fun just to be able to, like, talk with you guys and try to be part of this with you, because we could be like other developers and just kind of say, hey, well, here you go, and then not even bother to help you with it. But I feel like the community is what makes this company, rather than the company making the community. And I think you guys are just as important as any one of us working here, because without you, we don't have a reason to do this. So it's really good that we can do these streams and talk to you and try to be a bit more personal rather than just some faceless company. So, like, if there's anything else that you guys want to know about while we're in here, please don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm just going to kind of go over some other basic material setups. What I'll do right now is go back into Studio and kick out some materials and just show you how I set them up inside of Unreal. In the meantime, yeah, the chat room has been open, will stay open. Feel free to talk if you guys have any questions or concerns. I'm more than willing to listen. I'm sure Linus will forward anything cool or anything worth talking about. Not that nothing is worth talking about, but you know what I mean. At least I hope you do.
I don't want to.
Well, why don't you do your job, Linus?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. That really came out horrible. I'm sorry. Whoa, I apologize. That was really horrible.
Jonathan is not in a joking mood tonight.
Well, it's not tonight. It's only 1:30 here.
It's tonight for me. Shut up.
On the most important side of the world, it's only 1:30.
Whoa. Whoa.
That was kind of
Hey, where's the company that you're working for located?
Right here, right now. Anyway, so here's a little kind of a quick material that I put together a while ago, and I don't know, I'm just kind of attached to it. I like having the little leaves kind of flowing over this stuff. I also have the, what do you call it, the tweaking down sample set, because on my machine this is running a little slow, even though I have a high-end machine. There's some optimizations that still have to be done to this. It's very much a beta tool, so all of the improvements will be coming soon. But what I'm going to do is put that down just a little bit so I can get this other stuff to pop out, and I will kick this out to Unreal and then load it up, and then we can take a look at it. So this is what I'm working with currently, and this is how it looks when it's tiled, which I'd say it's not too bad. You can see the tiling if you're looking for it, but I'd say it's covered up pretty good. What do you say, Elon?
Foliage over it, it'll be perfect. The biggest thing is trying to layer things and having good base layers, and then putting some ground scatter and plants and stuff over it, and then suddenly you have a really lifelike scene that just looks really
yes,
real.
Indeed. Okay, so I need to throw this into my... Oh, I don't want to kick this out at 256 pixels. That's horrible. Let's do 4K. And I'm going to actually load up the default metalness. So I want a cavity.
You can get a lot done with 246 pixels. Or 56, rather.
Well, yes, you could do that if we were still working on Warcraft 1, but we're not.
Hey.
Hey.
Warcraft 1 was sprite art, okay?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm sure it was, buddy.
Those were like at least 32 pixels.
Fair enough. So I'm going to go into my Megascans folder and grab these textures that have been kicked out currently, which went into my exports folder. Okay. Now I go back to Unreal as soon as this is done, and then I'll show you guys how I wire this stuff up. And this is going to be a really basic material setup, but I'll also set it up as a master ground material so that I can go and add anything else that I want to it at any point and get a different result out of it. Now, I may end up having to hand pack this myself because I do like having all the textures for cavity, roughness, and displacement. Actually, AO, displacement, yeah, maybe cavity should be its own texture. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, whichever way you want. It's sometimes can be more convenient to have it all in one texture, but then again, you might want to use it the actual separate map later on, and you don't want to have to bother with a pack texture. So all it comes down to preference, I think.
Fair enough.
Depends on quality as well. When you're RMA packing things, you do lose a little bit of quality on each of the channels. So if it's a very important texture that you want to get the most out of, you want to make sure to have that in its own.
Right. So what I can do here is pull up my content browser again, go to my textures, make a new folder. Not that the other ones weren't Megascans, but just for the purposes of what we're doing now. And drag and drop this in here until there we go. I've noticed that when you drag and drop into Unreal, you have to wait for the copy icon on your mouse to pop up twice. If you do it the first time, it won't do anything. If you do it the second time, it'll work. Did you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you when you go to drag something into Unreal, it will first come up with a "you can't do this" icon, and then it will say, "Oh, you can copy this here." And
yeah, it's a bit finicky with that stuff for sure.
And if you leave it there and move your mouse around a little bit, it will then say "you can't copy here," and then it will say you can do it. I'm just going to show that again, just so you guys know this is a little thing. There it goes, and now I can do it. But if I just drag and drop it right in there, it won't work. It just doesn't do anything. So it's kind of goofy. I don't know why it does that.
We're getting a few questions regarding Unity and setting this up in Unity.
I can't really give you guys any info on that, as this is specifically an Unreal Engine 4 stream.
Yeah.
I don't use Unity. I've never actually done much with it. We can look into doing that in the future. I'll have to find someone who can help us with that. But as far as this stream goes, I do apologize. I cannot cover that.
That's kind of the thing. We are at Quixel, at least on the artist side. When it comes to real-time engines, we're kind of Unreal fanboys, the whole bunch of us.
I wouldn't say fanboy. I would say we are Unreal specialists is a better term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're Unreal specialists. But if we do find someone or have someone on the team who is more efficient with Unity, we will definitely look into doing something similar with Unity in the future.
Okay, so I'm actually not going to bother packing this stuff because it just doesn't make any sense to do it. But you know what? I probably should remove all this because I do need to change all of these textures to, and this is something you guys need to do as well. Where did this go? Why is this not showing up? Oh, it's behind the material. That explains it. So in here, what we need to do is hide all this other stuff. Okay. The default compression is wrong. You have to change this compression. I believe turning sRGB off is the easiest way to do it. I like to set it to masks. It's just the easiest way to get about this. Masks is what you'll want to use on any texture that you've brought in that's RMA packed, which means that, or channel packed. RMA is just our way of calling it, but channel packed literally means that you've put 3 textures, or even sometimes 4, into one texture by placing them into specific channels. So I'm going to do this for each one of my textures here. So for my cavity map, I want this to also be set to masks compression as well to get rid of the sRGB, which will basically bring it down into the proper rendering level that it should be at. If it's being if it's not being gamma corrected and it's being left at the default, I feel like what, 2.2, isn't it, Linus? The gamma curve.
Yeah, something like that.
If you leave it at that, actually I might leave it that for the displacement, but for the roughness and whatnot, it needs to be turned off.
Yeah, it's really important to do it for the roughness, especially because the difference is crazy. So basically, any grayscale, texture, roughness, cavity, AO, you should be changing to mask compression.
If you don't do that, yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off there. If you don't turn off sRGB on roughness, it will be about 20% too bright, roughly. It'll be just way too bright. And when you're going through like values of roughness, 20% is a humongous value. It can be the difference between this wood looking like this and looking like that creosote on top of it. That's like a gigantic difference in the two. You definitely don't want that to happen. It used to happen frequently to a lot of users. It's one of the most common issues we'll face with Unreal is make sure that your textures are sRGB off and compressed correctly. So now that they've actually been compressed properly, what we can do now is go into the material itself, which is here. So we have my albedo texture, which is also set to it's sRGB. It doesn't need to be gamma corrected. It's perfectly fine the way it is. I've got an AO map that I'm going to bring in as well. So I'll put that above that. Okay, and I'll bring the rest of my textures in, which I should have just done simultaneously, but you know, for comedic effect, we'll just do it one at a time. All right. So this is the roughness map. I like to organize these things too, so I put them in terms of where I would normally use them. I'm going to throw the cavity map up here because it'll probably get blended into the albedo map. Displacement. There we are.
And real quick as well, if you didn't know about the compression and you already have shaders set up, if you do disable the sRGB on the masks, you will start to get errors in your materials, and all you got to do is change the I believe it's sampler type to masks. Yeah, on the specific texture samples that you have in your materials to fix that error if you were changing it now.
Okay, so you can see a slight difference between these two textures with the multiply added directly, but there's not much of a change here. So what I like to do is add a levels. Now what you can do with the 3-point levels, this looks really complex, but we're only going to use a couple of these things. I'm going to make a parameter, which I just press 1 on my keyboard to have the constant 1 vector show up, and then I just convert to constant. There used to be a keybind, I can't remember what it is now, to do just a 1 vector as a parameter. But the default value for this is going to be 1 for right now. We're going to call it, actually, I want it to be 0 for low, rather. And I'm going to copy and paste that. Just Control-C and Control-V to paste. This will be mid. This is going to be a really roundabout way of doing what I would have done in Photoshop to get the same effect, but this is non-destructive. So the high point should be 1, the midpoint should be 0.5, and the low point should be 0. If anybody is familiar with levels, you know exactly what I'm doing right now. So the black value is 0, the mid value is 0.5, and the high value is 1. We're going to load that up into this, and load that up into this multiply here. Which, there we go. That looks significantly different. Probably going to look awful. So go ahead and apply this, and since this is a parameter, or these things are parameters, I can actually make an instance of this, and then start playing with it. So if I come back to this mossy ground, which now looks like a white ball, okay. Now in here, I can then pretty much adjust everything in here. So I can change, why is it only showing nothing? What's going on here? I must have screwed something up here. What did I screw up? Throw that back over here. So it's all connected correctly. I'm not sure why it's not showing up though. But for the time being, I'll just plug in these other maps just to see if something else.
Have you made sure to actually compile your material?
I hit apply and I hit save. It should have worked. Oh, well, there it goes. Oh, you know what? Never mind. Never mind, we're good. Okay, so let's try this. 0.1. So see what happens when we set it all to 0. So we get charcoal, essentially. Looks like garbage. Some of this stuff is trial and error, but we will try to adjust some of this to get a better result in a second.
I mean, as Jonathan was going through earlier, a lot of this stuff for us really is trial and error. We know the methods, but actually getting the perfect results out of the things that we, towards what we're trying to achieve, it's always just number tweaking. It's many hours spent number tweaking.
And I'll be the first person to admit when I screw up, and I think I actually set that material up incorrectly. So let's ignore what I just did and move on to a different one. And change this to something else. Okay. Pull that into that. Pop that in there. There we go. Now we'll adjust this in here again. So, for whatever reason, maybe it wasn't set up incorrectly. It could just be because this may need to be set to... Oh, I know what I did wrong. Ooh, I'm stupid. There we go. Much better. Hopefully nobody in chat saw that one. Okay, that's better. Okay. No, that's the wrong one. You're supposed to play the Price is Right horn.
What is that?
Oh God, you don't know. All right, let's get back to what I had. I'm going to throw the 3-point levels in there. Oh my gosh, that was so stupid. I actually forgot to connect. I connected the same AO map to the multiply twice, essentially is what I did. So let's go through all that one more time and speed through it. We'll just call that 1 with a default value of 0. Call this one 2 with a default value of 0.5, and call this one 3 because I don't want to type all that again. Okay, this one will go to... I still can't believe I did that. Okay, here we go. There we go. That makes more sense. Back to this. Now we're going to enable pretty much all of these and adjust the strength of the AO map. So we'll leave the top one at 1, bring this one up. That's not having any effect. 3. So now you can kind of see how you can play with these values to pull out different depth and whatnot. We're going to do more to this in a second, but let's leave this at, clamp that at 1, bring this down, maybe bring this, okay, so the 0 has no effect on it, so it's the midpoint that's doing most of the work here. Okay, that has a little bit of depth. What we're going to do now is go back and add the cavity map to all this, so let's pull this stuff right here back so it's a little easier to look at. And we will then do the same thing with the cavity map. And I'll have to probably call this something. Actually, you know what? I think the engine can differentiate between these, but I'm just going to call it something else, like 4, 5, and 6, just so I know which one is which, and I'm not screwing up the wrong one. And pull the cavity into this, multiply that into this to get some extra depth to it, and wire that up into the base color. We're going to parameterize the roughness and the normals as well to just push this even further. Let's see here, 4, 5, and 6. There we go. Now you can see some differences here. The cavity map has more information in it, so it's a little easier to play with the values.
Yeah, really helping here.
Okay, so this doesn't look anywhere near as flat as it did. So if I turn all this off, you can definitely see a pretty big difference in the way this looks. Let's change this to a plane. Okay. Alright, so from just to the side slightly with some light, we'll zoom in and we'll turn all this back on. So the AO map turned on, there's a little bit more depth, and the cavity map multiplied into it. Definitely looks a little bit better to me. It's not a humongous difference, but it's enough to pop it out. And these textures really need it because if you don't have AO in here, the engine itself doesn't seem to handle it very well. It's not like a rendering engine where it'll properly do it. Sometimes you have to force it into it. We'll parameterize the roughness as well here. So go to that, set that to default value of 1. On a multiply node, anything set to 1 will just pass through essentially, so it won't do anything. If we change the value of that afterward, we can then increase it to make it less shiny and decrease it to make it more shiny. So going up decreases the shininess, going down increases it. So we get some fine-tuned control over this. Now I would have used like an RGB, like a constant 3 vector to change this so I'd have control over red, green, and blue channels, but it doesn't really make much of a difference for something that's essentially grayscale anyway. So I'd say leave it at the value of 1, because that's actually probably pretty good for this particular material. And we go back down to here. I want to do the same thing for the normal map, but I'm going to hold down V while I do it, and that will make technically makes a constant 4 vector, which has got the alpha map in it, but it doesn't really matter. We're not going to use that part of it. We'll call this normal strength. And then inside of normal strength, we will then add a multiply. Actually, I can just hold M and do that. So we will multiply the normal map against this, but this needs to be set to 1, 1, and 1, so it does nothing to it. Throw that into the normal map. Go back to our other material. Now we can take the normal map itself through the vector parameter here, enable it, and then adjust the strength of the details on the fly. So you can make it more flat by adjusting the blue value so it looks pretty much like an albedo map, or you can make it look a little bit more like it's got depth. So 0.75 to lower the blue value, 2 and 2 to pop it out more. Now it looks a little bit more crunchy, I'd say. It's got some meat to it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's looking really good, man. The depth is just being added in. Combination of the boosted normals and the AO just really start to boost it up, and then with tessellation, it'll just be the final icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if the tessellation will actually display on these particular meshes in here correctly. We may have to throw it on a plane or something, but
Yeah.
yeah, the normals in the scans really shine, because like especially this little piece right here, you can see how
Yeah, the light hits it at different angles.
yeah, it's so
It's great.
realistic. It's
Yeah.
it's the world we live in right now with texturing. It just blows my mind, man. I remember
Yeah.
doing all this crap by hand, and it never looked good ever. It just did not hold up. Okay.
Yeah, which just makes you appreciate just the quality you get from Megascans, just right out of the box with no work on your end. Just throw it in there and like you get that quality.
Now, I'm sure you could probably do something else too, or if you could actually take the AO map or even the cavity map itself and multiply that into the roughness map to even, you know what, maybe we should try doing that while we're here to give it a little bit more control. Because we could then determine, kind of like how if you've ever used Sketchfab, you can actually have the AO map or the cavity map, I believe, control the specular highlights. So where areas are receded, they are less likely to shine, and where they're more pronounced, they are shinier. Do you want to try setting that up? It'd be kind of like a trial and error.
That's interesting. I've never tried it myself, but yeah, worth it.
I have done that with a few assets, and with something like grass, I actually wouldn't do that because the differences will make it look more like plastic. It'll just kind of look strange. I don't really know how to describe it. We can try it out, but
Yeah,
personally, I think it's going
right.
to look strange. But on certain objects, it can be done pretty well, like on metallic surfaces.
Yeah, let's just skip it for now. It's probably too much stuff being added into this shader. All right, so I'm going to go back to my other material because I really don't want to rebuild this displacement by memory. I cannot remember how to do it off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've been in here. But I have this stuff set up and I can show you how to make it. So we'll just deconstruct what I've already made. So
After you're done with the shader, we have some requests to break down the lighting in your scene a little bit.
sure. I mean, that's
Cool.
not really Megascan specific, but I don't have a problem with that. We're already here anyway. Let's open up the materials tab. You can't see what I'm doing. Let me put it over here. And I will go to the albedo for the ballast and just grab everything related to the displacement, which is all this fun stuff right here. Okay, copy that, go back into here, and paste it. Okay, and we will then wire this up into the... Wow, why is it not showing up as world
You have
displacement?
to enable tessellation first, then there.
Gotcha. Haha, see? It's been a while since I've done this. Let us go down to...
Last tab there at the very bottom. Yeah, there you go.
We want crack-free displacement. We do not want crack. In
I would also turn off adaptive as well.
Why would you say
Rook's
that?
good.
Yeah, you get these crazy artifacts sometimes, so
Okay.
it's better to turn it off.
Fair enough. This is why I have these guys come in here, because I don't know everything. I know enough to get by. Okay, so the world position offset is world displacement. And then we need to just go back to this, grab that, because I don't feel like making another one. Now, I remember why I set this to 100. I was really annoyed because it wouldn't actually function, so I'm like, okay, well, if it won't function at 4, I'll set it to 100. That'll show it. And it still didn't do anything. And when I finally got it to work, it just all over the place. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is all wired up correctly. We need to then take this and plug it in here. And we may
So what the
actually-
multiplier is doing is it's subdividing the input mesh. So whatever mesh you're putting it on, it's subdividing the geometry. So you need to have a little bit of subdivision in your planes if you want to get a good effect here.
We'll actually use the same plane that I use for the rails,
Yeah,
the ballast, because it's already set up and ready to go for that.
Mhm.
So you can see it showing up in here, and it's looking a lot like the 3U previewer balls for the materials. So yeah, I would say it doesn't look half bad. Let's turn all this other stuff off. Go into tessellation, multiplier, distance, displacement, strength. Look at that. Now we can adjust how much tessellation there is, and this is all completely non-destructive, so you can change this at any point you feel like it. But that really adds a lot of depth to this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not entirely satisfied with the shadowing yet, so I may play with that a little bit more. But it's nice that I can do that whenever I feel like it. I can give this more depth. I can give it more personality. I can make it a giant white ball of death. No, I don't want to do that. It's stupid. There we go. Let's see. So it's fascinating to me how the 3-point level system works in this engine, because I like that I can just wire it up to anything and just have full manual control over it. It feels like it adds so much more to the complexity of it, even if it's just like a basic material. Because I've seen some of the stuff that Epic's come out with their materials, and it just makes my head spin. Like, I don't even how you people, like, are you a wizard? Like, how do you do
There's
this?
some incredibly talented people in there, for sure.
Yeah. Well, then again, like, all they do is do this. So like, if you weren't good at it at that point, I'd be kind of like, how are you still like working?
Yeah.
So now the distance here actually determines how far out this stuff projects. So we can make it turn into a giant spiky ball and go super crazy with it. Whoa, look at that, artifacting. Or we can keep it in the realm of reality where it's kind of more subdued. But you can still change the strength so it pops out more, but just doesn't pop out as far. So it really comes down to what you want to do. It's almost like a clamp in a sense.
We've got a question here why you're not using the material AO input.
It doesn't really seem to have any effect from when I'm using it inside of... let me go back to Unreal real quick. I'm actually in it, but I'm not... Where the hell is my...
Yeah,
oh, there it is.
It's a bit of a gray area right now.
Yeah,
basically, Epic removed the AO. It doesn't actually do anything right now because it was to do with the technical... how many shader models they could fit in or something like that. So right now it doesn't actually do anything, which means Jonathan's method is actually better.
Well,
if you want to get good AO.
It doesn't. I think it does stuff if you're not doing what I'm doing, where I'm actually using distance field ambient occlusion in here, where it's based off the geometry of the meshes and whatnot.
It really, really doesn't. I mean, very, very barely. You can sometimes see it in only occluded areas where shadow is being cast, but it's very, very faint and barely does anything. So just save yourself the material instructions and skip it.
Like if I change the occlusion on here, I think it's... Yeah, this is using DFAO. So if I change the values in here, I might be able to just turn it off. Let's see, cast shadows. Yeah, see, like the AO in my texture on my locomotive doesn't even pop out at all. It's even though it's hooked up, it's just not doing anything. But when I have DFAO turned on, it suddenly starts casting shadows again. So it's like, at least in my case, I can't comment because I don't ever work with anything but DFAO. But with DFAO on, at the very least, it seems to turn that texture input and just does nothing to it. So like without DFAO, I think the scene would look really bland. I use it wherever I can. I don't normally make games. I work like periphery to games in the sense that I develop the tools that people use with them. So like the end result of the scene is not going to be, hey, can you run this in real time as like a video game scene. It's going to be something that says, hey, look how awesome this stuff looks if you were to crank it up as far as you possibly could. So it's not going to be optimized for real time as much. It'll probably still run. It's just not going to be something you'd want to have a death match of like 100 people on. So back to the material itself. Now that we've got this all set up as a spiky little shader ball, we can save that so I don't lose any of this work. Okay. And I will copy the, what do you call it? The little mesh that I used here. And we will then apply that particular piece of material to it. So Control-Shift-F to bring up, where'd the content browser go? There it is. And just drag and drop that onto it. And I believe I put that in here, didn't I? Yes, I did. There we go. Now you can kind of see that it doesn't look as good here because it's like a little tiny little jungle. So we need to
That
do
was like
some,
a Worms 3D level.
yes. So we need to adjust that. We need to rein in the displacement a bit, which is what's so nice about doing this as instancing, because in Unreal you have the power to change all this stuff if you set it up to do that. Otherwise, you have to go back and forth and change a couple values, hit save, wait for it to update, and it's really just not worth doing. I really hate that. I like to just see it on the fly. You can do it with terrain too, if I'm not mistaken. Let's change this to something more reasonable. So it could also be that the light from the sun is probably too bright. Thanks, Owen. We'll change that down a little bit. Something closer to perhaps 15, so it doesn't blow this stuff out. There we go. So now you can kind of see it a bit better. So let's close all this. So there's an unobstructed view. Alright. And again, we can change the roughness on the fly here. We can change, we can even turn off all the AO and see what it looks like without it. But I think you would agree that looks a little flat. But if you add, even just adding the cavity map back into it, makes a pretty big difference. Actually, I'd say the cavity map looks better than the AO map in this case.
Yeah, cavity tends to get the nice small details and really get those small shadows that just won't be picked up by the actual lights in UE4.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. I also think the roughness is probably too strong, but let's see. That's also because I changed the roughness down way too much. Yeah, that's looking pretty decent there. Now if we change the tessellation multiplier to like 8 or 16, you get even more detail out of it. This is obviously something you probably wouldn't run like this in real time. There's probably a buttload of triangles here. I believe it's, what is it? Wireframe, there we are. Yeah, it's a lot of triangles.
Yeah.
It's more reasonable for a game, would probably be closer to like 2. So you still get some tessellation there. Actually, maybe closer to 4, where it was originally.
Yeah, well, most games that do it have just that distance-based one. So close to the player, you'll have a very high amount, and then it suddenly fades out to a flat texture. And they do it to blend in an unnoticeable way. So you have the detail close to you.
So yeah, I'd say this is working pretty well. I think we've covered most of the bases that I wanted to cover today. For anybody who was having issues figuring out how to get the stuff from Megascans into Unreal, I think I've covered the basics of setting up a material, setting up a quick master material. By the way, if you before I close this out, if you go to the mossy ground itself, or this material that we made, you can actually convert all this stuff to a parameter. And then you can it's going to give it a really dumb name. If you call it something like normal, for example, when you have your instance, you can actually go there and replace it with any other texture and just drag and drop right into it. And it saves you a humongous amount of time. That's how I did the foliage and the grass. It's how I've done the terrain. Everything in here is built to be modular, so I can quickly iterate and not have to focus so much on wasting time with waiting for Unreal to save and change things. It's
not only does it save time, it also saves a lot of performance by using material instances instead of creating new materials for every single thing.
Yeah, that's true, because you don't have to. Isn't that? Yeah, it is a performance.
Yeah, it doesn't consume the draw calls.
I can't really speak on that. I'm not a tech artist, but I'll take your word for it. So yeah, I don't mind running this a little bit longer. We did say we'd go until 2 o'clock, but if you guys have anything else, I think we wanted to talk about lighting, perhaps. Was there any specific information that we wanted to talk about with lighting? Because really, the lighting in the scene isn't anything particularly fancy.
Yeah, no, it was just some questions about the HDR and the general light setup.
Okay, so this HDR is actually something Owen kind of talked to me about. I was just going to be content to use the basic Unreal scene. And God, that looks horrible in comparison, doesn't it?
Yeah. Just the biggest thing I've noticed when trying to be realistic in Unreal is do not use procedural clouds if you can, because it just, I see a scene and I instantly know, like, it's just, that default sky just seems to suck the reality out of things. So I would very highly recommend either checking out True Sky, which is a procedural sky plugin, or else grabbing some HDRs and using that to light the scene, because they add just so much more realism to the scene, and it is using real life data as well, so you're going to be lighting much more accurately. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually using the HDR to light the scene though.
Oh, okay, right. You're just
But
using it on
it
actual.
might actually be. I mean, I think the screen space reflections are picking it up.
If you have the skylight set to the surrounding scene, like that's where it's getting its light from.
I believe it is
Yeah,
actually.
so that's it is using the HDR then.
So
Yeah.
captured scene. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. But I can't remember if we actually gave it an HDR as an input. We need to go and check that. Be under
There's a
textures.
request here if you could take a screenshot of your node tree and post that possibly to Facebook after the stream.
I wouldn't feel comfortable posting it to. Well, maybe I could post it on the company page. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something we would normally post there. I could put it on the tools group, by all
Yeah, yeah.
means. But I mean, you can also, I mean, just as easily pause this when it's on YouTube and just look at the node layout too. But for convenience's sake, I'll do it for you. It just you may have to remind me. I have so much stuff I have to do in a certain day. It's very difficult to remember some stuff. I don't think this is an HDR. It's actually just a Targa. So yeah, that's actually not an HDR file. I don't even think Unreal takes HDRs, does it?
It does, yeah.
It does.
You can import them as HDRs, but they're severely limited resolution. I think the newest version allows you to go quite high, but
Mm.
it takes a lot of texture memory. So
But
um,
that's not really a
yeah,
concern here. So
yeah, exactly.
we're kind of fine with that.
It just
Um,
tends to crash out if you go higher than like 1K for some reason. So
I
just
wonder why.
yeah,
Can't handle the awesomeness of actual light.
yeah.
So we did play with some of the skylight settings too, because all this stuff is just kind of preliminary for now. But 25 seemed to work pretty well. It's just really bright in that ground. It's a little bright on the locomotive itself too, but I don't know. I guess sunlight really is bright. And when I was in
Mm.
DDU too, for those of you guys who are curious, I don't know what the scientific term is for the way light splits into RGB as you get really close to an object when it's hit by direct sunlight. Have you ever noticed that when you like look at something under glaring sunlight, it looks like red, blue, and green dots?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's Newton's rings or some other effect, but I see it on everything. Like when I'm riding my bike home, like I look at even the bar tape on my handlebars, it'll turn into like RGB, like it almost looks like it's covered in like a sheen of oil when you get up really close to it, but it's not. It's
It's some weird form of eyeball specific chromatic aberration.
yeah, that could be what it is too. Um, because because of that, I actually tried adding. It wouldn't work in Unreal, I don't think, but I tried adding a gloss map or no, it was a spec map into my DDU project so that I had like a uniform, just like Gaussian noise with like rainbow colors all over it, and it gave that same effect when you got up close to it. It was really cool, but yeah, not something I don't think you can actually get that effect in Unreal, and I don't even know if people would even appreciate looking at it. It's kind of jarring when you get up close to it. It's like, what the hell is this? So, yes. So you guys, as I mentioned in the first stream, this is going to be put up on the on my YouTube account up for Quixel. I'll make sure that it gets transferred as soon as this is done. I'm going to open up the closing comments. I want to thank Linus and Owen for both being here and helping out with this. You guys are awesome. I want to thank all you guys who are here as well. It's been phenomenal getting to talk to you, getting to hear from you a little bit. We do, if you're not part of the Quixel Tools Facebook group, I will highly recommend that you go there. It is where we do most of our stuff. So in here, you'll see all sorts of art being shared. Teddy, who is our illustrious and glorious CEO, will often post here talking about amazing things that we're working on. You'll see events like this popping up before anybody else normally gets any kind of information on it. You can share any of the work that you've made. There's always beta tools and tests that you can participate in here. It's just facebook.com/groups/Quixel Tools Group. We have a live support group as well if you have any issues with the software. Um, there's some pretty awesome stuff coming up. I'm going to try to run these streams a little bit more frequently now that my hands are being freed up from support and focusing more on doing this with you guys. So if you have any ideas or comments that you'd like to pass on, please let us know. We're very responsive to anything that you'd like to do. The Megascan service, for those of you who are interested, is very much a beta service. So the more critical you are of it and the more like feedback you can give us to improve it, the better it's going to get. So don't hesitate to let us know what you really think about it and what you'd like to see improved, because we are very much interested in making it a better service for everyone. We are very much a company that's based, like, it's built by artists and it's developed for artists. So whatever makes you happy is going to make us happy. With that being said, it's been fantastic. I'm glad that I got a chance to talk to you guys. See you again soon.
Bye.
See ya.